Hello, welcome to the Good Life Meditation for today, January 31st, 2022. I'm Kurt, and this is something that I do every morning to start my day, to remind myself of my life objectives and principles, and to see how I did yesterday applying these against the challenges of the day and the opportunities, and to plan for the day that's about to occur. First, yesterday, nothing much to report. It was a very good Sunday. My wife Yumiko and I decided to go down to Irvine. Our daughter's boyfriend is going to come out for the weekend next week, and when Emily, our daughter, asked him what he wanted to do while visiting, he said he wanted to have Yumiko, Emily's mother's cooking. So we decided to go down to Yumiko, my wife, was inspired, so we decided to go down to Irvine to the Japanese supermarket to get various ingredients for, we're going to have a real feast. So looking forward to that. So during the day yesterday, nothing more than the usual, daily life challenges of just maneuvering through the day, which was successfully completed. I wish that there had been more giving in yesterday than just living. My wife and I, Yumiko and I, were talking about some people that we know that are going through some challenges, and we have chipped in to help out. I wish there was a way to do more. In general, maybe that'll become more of an opportunity as our daughter goes off on her own life, and Yumiko and I have more resources and time to apply to others. I'd like that. Okay, now the Good Life Meditation. First, 7 objectives, and these are as follows. Number 1 is to be always ready to die. Just to live in such a way that my affairs are settled, my relationships are sound, and my life objective is in a state of as completeness as possible, even if it's underway. That it's a complete, like if I was keeping a journal, even if the journal wasn't filled, at least the last paragraph was complete and it was punctuated, and the journal was in plain sight for the people who survived me to find, for whatever that's worth. The next objective is to make a good and effective use of my time. To not take life for granted, and to not let the moments slip through my fingers any more carelessly. To not let the moments slip through my fingers carelessly. To treat them as though they were meaningful. Because even though they are not in the absolute sense, they do have some meaning to those who remain alive. And maybe to those who follow, if what I can do ripples in a positive way through time and across generations. Next is to develop and maintain good and sound life principles. I'm up to 7 objectives and 30 principles now in, what has it been, 4 or 5 years, starting with 5. So I guess I'm maintaining these and building them. I still remember coming up with those 5. It was on a motorcycle ride between the 55 freeway and the 91 freeway on the way to Riverside that I came up with the 5. Interesting. The first 5. It wasn't too hard. The next objective is to cultivate good emotional reactions. To become the kind of man that even if inside I'm panicked or angry or thrilled, the outside of me shows a rather deliberate, steady state, as the Emperor Marcus Aurelius described in the Meditations, to be always the same. Next is to perform good actions, to find ways throughout the day to make things a little better. And then the next objective is to recognize true limits and true opportunities. What is within and without the scope of my ability, so that I don't waste undue time holding back the sea, and instead spend better time building a raft to stay afloat upon it. And then lastly, for the last objective, is to just do one thing at a time, and to always do that thing slowly, which I'm getting much better at. This one's really emerging in the last month or so as something more regular and sound in my life. The one thing slowly. That might be a result of the fact that I'm easing out of a difficult work situation. The last job that I had took a lot out of me, and the new job is a better suit for me, better match for me. It's easier to live in better control, and life is a better match. Okay, next, 30 principles. The first of these is the principle of war. To always be working hard to make sure that I'm believing things that are true and holding principles that are a good match for the world. And I do this through the second principle of reason, which has 3 sub-principles of honesty, objectivity, and doubt, which are the character traits and the attitude and the criteria that I hold in applying reason to the world to discover what's true. The next principle is the homunculus, the idea of a small mortal residing in my head, just behind my eyes. There really isn't one there, but this is a label, homunculus, that I apply to my consciousness. And I do this so that I remember that the homunculus is trapped, that I do not have a soul, and that what this is that seems to be me will wink out and be gone utterly upon death, as well described by Lucretius on the Nature of the Universe, which I just started reading this weekend. Highly recommended. Good read at this point in my life. Maybe one of the first skeptics to write down well. Well, he was inspired by Epicurus, who in turn was, or in his time, 300 odd years before Lucretius, was a very bold skeptic. The next principle is the home of good and the Anchorhold, which I like to picture as a small rock sticking out of the sea of death, and that we're perched upon that rock where the waters, the dangerous waters, cold and dark and deep, are swirling all around, rising with some strange tide that gets very close, lowering and giving us the illusion of comfort, and sometimes stormy and windy and cold or burned hot, and on periodic days quite pleasant. And that's where we live. And there's only one of us on each rock, and we'll never get across to any other rocks. The best we can do is shout across the waves to one another. That's how alone we all are. Even when we're in the bosom of our loved ones, we are utterly alone. As Lucretius would say, there's just the atoms and the void. That doesn't mean we have to be depressed, because the experience of being with others really feels real, and really does feel love. We do feel loved, and we do feel warm, and holding someone's hand is quite a nice thing to do. But it doesn't relate the fact that we're alone, and we will die alone, and we will be gone forever. Another struggle with a good life is to keep a positive outlook in the face of such bleak perspective and expectation. The next principle is the home of good and evil. The suggestion that right and wrong do not exist as absolutes in the universe, but are opinions that we maintain and develop, maybe simply accept through convention of our society and the status quo. But in those of us who are maybe a little more diligent, who actually try to work at it, to use reason to ascertain, and fortitude then to hold on to, even in spite of what is the more common sense. And those are the rules that we use to guide ourselves. And we remember always that these rules are is the word effable? That sounds like a nasty word, but erasable? Maybe. It's interesting, one of those vocabulary that just floats up in my head. The next principle is purpose. It's helpful to have some purpose in life. And the three purposes that I maintain are: one, I call it biology with a capital B, which is to be a father and by extension a husband, to have a child or more than one, to raise into adulthood, and to help them to carry on after we're gone. I call that biology because it seems that our wiring of what we are supports that objective. We are rewarded by ourselves from everything from the satisfaction of an orgasm to the delight and wonder of watching our children born, walking off to school, developing, growing into young adults, heading off to college, having their own families of their own. All that stuff gives us some intrinsic reward that comes, and it's very real and tangible, and it comes, I believe, from our genetics, because if we weren't wired that way, we wouldn't be so motivated to do it. So it's a mandate of sorts, and it's a good mandate, because without it we wouldn't be. There are two other principles that I maintain. The second is to live a virtuous life, where virtue is evident in the happiness of others, a happiness that doesn't come at the expense of others, a virtuous happiness. And then the last principle is some mission that we might choose in life to take on. Although we can get by just fine without a mission. A lot of people don't need one. But for those of us that seem to want one and maybe even need it, it's good to have something. And my mission was the experiences that led to the writing of this book, Going Alone, which summarizes my good life creed, these 7 objectives and 30 principles. Available on Amazon or on my website, goingalone.org. The next principle is the atomic principle. Everything is bits and pieces. as so Lucretius so eloquently states over and over again, atoms and void, atoms and void. And so too, you and I are made of these atoms that swirling in the void. Very soon these atoms will fall to pieces. The atoms will remain, the void will remain, but you and I will be gone. And gone for good. And no soul going, slipping away and hiding somewhere. That's gone. That homunculus is gone too. So enjoy life when we have the chance. It appears there's nothing more. Next is the principle of nature. Everything has some particular nature, and it's good to recognize what that nature is. I was thinking this morning earlier that it's the nature of my new job to be how do you describe it? I'm trying to think of a way. Maybe I shouldn't go there. I have less responsibility. My last job, I was a manager, and I didn't enjoy doing that. I enjoy working hard, and I enjoy projects, and I enjoy a mission, but I didn't enjoy being a manager. And it's the nature of my new job to not be a manager. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm so much happier now at this new job. Well, I know that's the reason, because I can do good work, and I can do hard work, and I can be a part of good things, but I don't have to be a manager anymore. Because it's not a job that it's not part of my nature. It's also, that's true too. It's not in my nature. I could do it, but I don't want to. Okay, the next next principle is the pirate ride, which is my suggestion, that my way of thinking that, or reminding myself that it appears that free will is an illusion. We're like the automatons in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, always moving. Although our matey, our vesty matey, although our emotions are a lot more complicated and almost convincingly our own, but I expect that they are not. We are the motive force, but we are pushed and jostled in the direction of whatever decision we make by the circumstances of the universe happening and unfolding all around us. I don't think that if you could rewind the universe and replay everything back the same way, I think that every time we would make the same decision. I'm nearly convinced of it. Yet I can't prove that. So I hold that almost like a position of faith, which I know is a sin. Forgive me, Father. Okay, next comes maturity and the sub-principles of wisdom and fortitude. Maturity is that state that we can arrive at when we have experience and we remember what has worked and what has failed, and we are strong in pursuing the successes and avoiding the failures in the future. Next comes the social principle. Am I missing one? Oh yeah, I knew I was missing one. No, I'm not. Not yet. The social principle is next. We human beings need one another. We're like wolves or chimpanzees, dogs even. We need others of our pack. We need a pack. We need a community. We don't do so well alone. We can get by, but something seems to be amiss. So I pursue that. Even though I like to be alone, I pursue a family and a home and a society. I'm not very good at it necessarily, but I'm working at it. Next, after the social principle, comes the principle of public speaking, and a reminder to be very careful and deliberate in my speaking, to use just a few words and to choose them carefully, to try to convey accurate meaning and to be very careful about what I say when I'm speaking about others, and to not speak of others if I would be in a way that I would be embarrassed if they overheard me saying it. So basically, to not gossip. It's very important to me not to do that. The next principle is temperance, to control all of my activities and to be measured in all that I do and say, consume, believe, and think, and live. The three sub-principles there are suffering, because we suffer when we say no to ourselves. Simplicity, because when we are temperate, we live a simple life by definition, and vice versa. And then apathy, which is a quality and a skill to be able to ascertain when something is outside of our control and to let it go. Ooh, I can use a little bit of that right now. There's something going on today that I could use a little apathy. Yeah, I will. I can already feel the anxiety slipping away. I'm not going to give the details because it's an active thing related to work. I am also applying a little of the principle of nature there. Snoring dog. Okay, so that was temperance. The next principle is why am I having a mind block all of a sudden? Okay, social principle, public speaking, temperance. Oh, the horror show. This one always makes me breathe heavy. I get anxious when I think about this. That's the purpose. That's why I added this principle, was to remind myself of this fact, that it's not all fun and games. There's a lot of really horrible things happening right now to others and to animals, other animals, to our pets and to wildlife and to us even. And if it isn't happening now to us, it's going to happen. The trick is to not let that overwhelm me and dominate my thoughts, but simply act as a reminder and it give me pause to be deliberate in my thinking and to be sensitive to the pain that's happening all around me. Be cognizant of it, and to try to do something about it if I can. It always gives me the shivers. The next principle is called that which must be borne, and this is a recent ad, and it's simply a reminder that depending on the choices that we make, well, our choices can entail responsibilities, and the responsibilities once underway, I'm thinking particularly of responsibilities related to children, such as maintaining a good relationship with our spouse, or at least a serviceable one, and fulfilling our obligations to our family, and namely our kids, holding down a job that we may or may not enjoy so much or may be challenging to us, and bringing food home or keeping the house clean and tidy and seeing to our kids' needs and looking after our spouse and et cetera, all the things that we have to do. A lot of this has to revolve around family and the commitments. Those are things that we have to bear as mature adults. We just have to do them. Even when we don't like it, we just do it. That's my reminder. There's other things we have to bear, which are sometimes a consequence of the horror show, or the fact of the horror show. We have to bear it. We just bear that as well. The things which must be borne, to to live the good life and to pursue a life of virtue. We have to bear, like for example, the suffering that is entailed in a temperate life. I could go on and on all day. We keep our hands on the tiller, steering the boat towards our destination. It's easy to set out in life maybe without any destination and just drift, but there's consequences to that too. Those consequences may rear their head more visibly at a later date relative to the social principle. Okay, after that which must be borne comes the principle of the Feast of Offal, which is my way to describe what happens when we lose our cool and we tell the whole world just how upset we are. And we spew it out, we blow up, we get upset, and I consider it's almost like a food fight, but we're the only one throwing food, and the food is pretty disgusting stuff. It's offal. It's the stuff within our mind that we would rather be able to find a way to make it go down the garbage disposal, but instead we grab it by handfuls and we throw it at you and toss it at you and up in the air, and what a mess. So I do two things with this principle. I try to remind myself that one, that happens, and two, that I will try not to engage in it, either as the instigator of the feast, or as consuming the waste of others. Because when someone throws their waste at me, blah, hits me right in the face, I tend to get some of it in my mouth, and I get sick, and then I eventually do the same. Blah. I try to stop that cycle by keeping my mouth closed and turning aside while someone else's feast is underway, and maybe reaching out a hand and say, there. It's a tricky thing. Okay, after the Feast of Offal comes the principle of distraction. We distract ourselves throughout our lives so that we don't have to see the great indifference, as I describe in my book, which is the purpose of going alone, was to ascertain and apprehend and think about the great indifference. We distract ourselves through all kinds of things, our families, our work, our hobbies. And we can do a very good job of spending our whole lives well distracted until the end comes. If it comes suddenly, then that's a blessing. If it sneaks up on us, and especially if it's painful and unrelenting, then the great indifference has a way of kind of becoming part of the fabric of everything around us. And that's a real horror show for some. And then the end is a blessing indeed. Although they may pray fervently for something more and something better, and a continuation in some sort in a life to come, the indifference is nevertheless quite unrelenting, being without ambition in its own right, other than inertia and energy. And, as Lucretia says, the atoms in the void. Enough of that. That was two principles. Okay, the next principle is the best seat in the house. A reminder to not want to be anyone else or be doing anything else, or to be anybody else, but to be okay with who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing right now. All the while striving to be better. As much of a paradox as that sounds. It's nice to have all these books there. Yumiko and I went and got bookshelves for me, and I keep all my books here, all the books that I want to read and all the books I've read. And as I look through the column on the right with all the red ones, each book, as I see their title, I remember what I learned from each of these books. It's a nice little piecemeal reminder as I sit here. Nice. Okay, after the best seat in the house comes the Path of Wildness. It's easy to find. The course of a stream, leaves blown in the wind, a beast's track through the brush and the direction of our first inclination. The path of wildness is the way to move forward into new circumstance, new life, new challenges. And it involves collecting facts, deliberating over the facts, and if necessary, letting our gut instinct weigh in and help us make a decision. And that decision may be to not do anything at all. And then being accepting of the consequence of whatever we decide, for good or bad. The next principle is called the risk of avoiding risk. This principle suggests that there are risks at the surface level that we are offered in life. And we're supported, almost everybody will support us in pursuing these risks, to assuaging them. These are our education, finding a job, finding a spouse, creating a family and a home, and then retirement, planning for retirement. All of these risks, just about everybody is going to be a cheerleader. Rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, you can do it. Whole institutions are set up in society, institutions of school and church, and institutions in government to support the institution of marriage, mortgages to buy a house, retirement savings funds, schools, all this stuff. Whole institutions to support us in these assuaging these risks. I think that's the right word. Assuage. But there's very few institutions and very little support if we want to assuage. Again, to use that word, I hope I'm using the right one. Principle of public speaking, by the way. There's very few institutions that help us to address the risk of not attending to ourselves, to our inner desire, our dreams, our ambitions, and as the hippies would say, our wish to find ourselves and to find some mission or purpose in life. Mostly, society views that ambition as a youthful indulgence and something that we can get by without. And in fact, a lot of us get by just fine without that. Many seemingly have very little interest in that type of thing. They just want those surface level risks. Lucky them. But for those of us that feel drawn to pursuing some deeper calling, or finding ourselves, like I said a couple of times, that's a harder one to do. So my recommendation is to attend to the deep level risk, the finding yourself part, early when you don't have as many responsibilities and you have less to lose and more time to recover. Namely, during and after college, from the mid to the end of the 20s. Give yourself that time for yourself. Degree in hand, degree in pocket, degree in the files back home. And then when you're done at the end of the 20s, come back to us in your 30s to start your 30s and begin addressing the deeper level risks, because they are important too. There's a reason for those things. Just a simple model and plan that I think might yield better results, because if you postpone that search, that quest until your old age, you'll find that old people are a little bit too frail, timid, typically frail, timid, and afraid, and too wise to make the necessary mistakes and take the chances that the young can do to yield the new horizons. It's those new horizons that are the key. Old people don't do that so much. They go golfing and they get on cruise ships, which are safe and sane, but there's very little in the way of new horizons to be seen upon a golf course or over the railing of a cruise ship. Okay, enough on that. The next one is sin and damnation. there are 7 sins in my worldview. And when these are indulged in, we wind up living a damned life. These are my mind just went blank. These are I have them, I do them in a particular order, and I can't remember the order, but I'll just remember the ones that I want. I'll see if I can count them out. Hope, which is wanting, but not coupled to action. So it's the fact that it's not coupled to action that makes it a sin. Hope alone is a sin. Faith, which is belief, where the belief itself is held forth as the evidence of that belief, which is a nonsense, a nonsense idea. You need something more than the proposition. The proposition can't serve as the evidence of the proposition. Superstition, which is belief, almost as by categorically recognized as nonsense. Dogma, which is belief based on the fact that that's the way people have believed for a long time, and it's maybe even been canonized in a book. Authority, which is belief because someone seemingly in a position of authority says so. Or look at all the letters after their name. They must know better. That's 5. 6 is gossip, which I've talked about already. And there's a 7th, and I can't remember what it is. Oh, falsity. There's 2 more. Hold on. Pardon me. Oh, boy. 2 more. What is that? 8? How did I do that? Excuse me. Credulity. I remember all them now. Credulity, which is believing too easily, and then falsity, which is lying. Any of those. Somehow I think I've got to 8 now. I'll have to think about that. Get that collected better. Anyway, I spent way too much time on that. Giving into any of those sins, indulging in those sins, leads to damnation. The next principle is complete oblivion. When we're dead, there'll be nothing left. Since we have no soul, there is no heaven or hell. God is just a dream, wishful thinking. When we're dead, we will be gone forever. As a result, there will be no reunion with the loved ones, and in another world, we'll have no chance to make things right with them after we're dead, and there will be no justice in another world. So it's important to attend to those things now, to reunite with those that we want to reunite with, to work to reconcile with those to whom we are on bad terms now, and to pursue justice through legal means and official venues in the here and now again. Otherwise, we just lose that chance. Other than his suicide, Hitler gets away with it. And there's no real justice for Anne Frank, sadly, other than the loss of the war and the Nuremberg trials for those that instigated her suffering and the sufferings of millions like her, just to pick an example out of history, right? Next comes the Great Life Adventure. I think I already talked about that. The thing that we do early in life, preferably in the decade of the 20s, to be our own, our little treasure that we put up on our shelf in our mind, or literally on our shelf. The photographs and postcards from exotic places, the scar that we got from that adventure, that all the money we lost in that scam, whatever the case may be. Maybe the fact of our death at an early age because of the folly of our youthful adventure. Even that alone, is something. Excuse me. Next comes after sin and damnation, or the Great Life Adventure, comes the season of philosophy, which is something that we do in the time that we want to record what we've learned along the way. the writing of our book, the painting of our picture, the taking of a photo, the story that we can tell, whatever it is that we do to share the message, what we've learned in life, our little bit, our barbaric yelp. The key is that when the words come to us, you better get them down, because they have a way of going away. The muse shuts up. Next comes, after the season of philosophy, comes the bullseyeing. We strive towards the bullseye, and we usually miss, and that's all right. Just keep on trying. Then comes the uphill climb. Up, up, up we go in life. Arena and utility. Life is an arena for the utilization, for the development of objectives and principles that we can then use in the service of our better living. The next principle is nothing is enough. A simple reminder that if we can get by with less, then we might find that that's in fact more. Lastly, the last principle is the principle of fun. A simple reminder to enjoy life while we can, to not take it too seriously. Leave some room for fun. I'm working hard on that one. I'm not very good at it. Okay, those are my 7 objectives and my 30 principles. That's my Good Life Creed, and this was my Good Life Meditation. A quick forecast of the day. As I mentioned earlier, I have a challenge at work that I need to work on, and I need to apply a little apathy to recognize what is outside of my control, and also the principle of nature, to realize that it is the nature of some of this behavior is the nature of some people and the nature of the institution, and wisdom to know that I've done my due diligence in so far as trying to use my experience to chart a way forward in what I'm doing that I believe will yield the right results, and to have fortitude to just carry on, and also to understand my true limits and my true opportunity. There's limits to what I can do to address the current circumstance, and there's opportunity that I have, and I'm going to work within those bounds. There, I already feel a little less anxious. Thanks for joining me today. Be safe, but not too safe.